Mom, please, just sign this power of attorney, my daughter-in-law pleaded, her voice a syrupy mix of feigned concern and thinly veiled impatience. Her eyes, usually as sharp as shards of ice, were glistening, brimming with an artificial tenderness that set every one of my 78-year-old nerves on edge. She held out the crisp document, its pages rustling like dry leaves in the quiet of my living room, the pen poised, an executioner's tool in her manicured hand. My grandson, Michael, stood a few paces behind her, leaning against the doorway, arms crossed, a smirk playing on his lips. His posture was a mirror image of his mother's internal state, confident, expectant, already counting their spoils. They thought I was old, frail, easy to manipulate, a relic whose mind was as brittle as her bones. They thought wrong. The living room, usually a sanctuary of soft light and cherished memories, felt like a stage for a hostile takeover. The scent of lavender, which usually clung to the old lace curtains, was now overshadowed by the cloying sweetness of my daughter-in-law's perfume, a smell I'd come to associate with deceit. This was the room where I'd rocked Michael to sleep when he was a colicky infant, where I'd celebrated countless birthdays, where I'd nursed a broken heart after my husband Arthur passed 5 years ago. Every antique, every faded photograph, every hand-stitched pillow held a story, a whisper of a life lived with integrity and quiet resilience. They saw only assets, ripe for the plucking. Their urgency had escalated in recent weeks, a feverish pitch that mirrored the rising stock prices of the tech company my son, David, worked for. David was notably absent, a convenience that allowed his wife Sarah to play the role of the devoted family member, burdened by my supposed decline. They'd been pushing for this power of attorney for months, citing my forgetfulness, my occasional dizzy spells, the general inconveniences of aging. They spoke of simplifying things, of ensuring my care, of protecting my future. All while their own futures, I suspected, hung precariously on the balance of my carefully amassed savings. I remembered Arthur's words, spoken just weeks before he left me. He'd been in the garden, pruning his beloved roses, his face etched with the wisdom of years. "Anna," he'd said, turning to me, his eyes twinkling, "always read the fine print and never trust a smile that doesn't reach the eyes." His words, a quiet warning, now echoed in the sudden tense silence of the room. Sarah's smile, fixed and unwavering, certainly didn't reach her eyes. I reached out, my hand trembling, not from fear, but from the deliberate effort of controlling my rising anger, of maintaining the facade of a senile old woman. My fingers brushed against the cool, smooth paper. The document was thick, dense with legal jargon, each paragraph a labyrinth designed to confuse and disorient. Sarah had explained it to me in simple terms, of course, patronizingly breaking down complex clauses into bite-sized lies. "This just allows us to pay your bills, Mom, so you don't have to worry, and manage your investments, just to keep everything tidy." "Tidy indeed, tidy for them. It's just a formality, Mom," Michael chimed in, his voice attempting a soothing tone, but laced with a condescension that scraped against my ears. "Everyone does it. It's for your own good." His words were a practiced script, memorized and delivered with the conviction of someone who genuinely believed their own deception. He even managed a concerned frown, a theatrical touch that almost made me chuckle. Almost. I looked at the signature line, a blank space waiting to seal my fate. My hand hovered. They held their breath, poised, ready to exhale in triumph. But I didn't sign that document. Oh no. I had my own plans. For weeks, ever since their visits had become more frequent, more demanding, more pointedly focused on my finances, I had been preparing. Quietly, methodically. They underestimated me, as so many had before. The world had always dismissed quiet women, assuming silence meant weakness. Gentleness meant gullibility. They learned differently, eventually. And my children, my own flesh and blood, were about to receive a lesson they would never forget. The truth was, I hadn't been idle. For weeks, a quiet hum of suspicion had been growing inside me. A tiny, insistent melody that played louder than all of Sarah's forced laughter and Michael's thinly veiled threats. It started subtly, with misplaced bank statements and hushed phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room. Then came the helpful suggestions. "Mom, why don't we set up automatic bill payments? So much easier for you." Or, "Let us take care of your portfolio. The market's so volatile these days. You need someone young with their finger on the pulse." Their fingers, I realized, were more on my pulse, my financial pulse, than the market's. My mind, though aging, was far from dull. I'd seen enough of life's sharp edges to recognize a trap when I smelled one, and this one reeked of desperation and greed. So, while they plotted and whispered, believing I was blissfully unaware, I began my own quiet investigation. It wasn't easy. They had taken over most of my digital accounts, citing my difficulty with technology. But they hadn't accounted for my old habits, the ones forged in a time before screens and passwords, a time when paper trails were king. I still had a hidden stash of physical documents, tucked away in an old cedar chest in the attic. My husband, Arthur, had always been meticulous with records. He'd taught me the value of keeping things, of having a backup, of understanding every detail. Among the yellowing deeds and faded insurance policies, I found what I was looking for. The original hand-signed power of attorney document I had executed with a lawyer just after Arthur's passing. It was a comprehensive document, granting David broad powers, but with one crucial, often overlooked clause. Any major financial transaction, including the sale of real estate or withdrawal of substantial sums exceeding $50,000, requires the notarized consent of the principal, Anna Mae Rogers, or a second, independently executed power of attorney, specifically detailing the nature of the transaction. They had forgotten that clause. Or perhaps, in their eagerness, they had never even bothered to read it. They assumed the general power of attorney, signed years ago, was their golden ticket. What they wanted me to sign now, the document Sarah was currently waving under my nose, was a new, much broader power, one that would remove that pesky, notarized consent requirement and give them unfettered access to everything I owned. It was a clear power grab, designed to circumvent the safeguards Arthur and I had put in place. I spent my evenings, long after they thought I was asleep, poring over old financial statements, cross-referencing dates and amounts. I discovered small, almost imperceptible withdrawals at first, then larger ones, disguised as home maintenance or medical expenses. My heart ached with each discovery, not just for the money, but for the profound betrayal. This wasn't just about my retirement. It was about the crumbling foundation of trust within my own family. My next step was to contact a lawyer, but not just any lawyer. I needed someone sharp, discreet, and with a reputation for handling elder exploitation cases. I remembered seeing a newspaper article years ago about a lawyer named Eleanor Vance who had successfully recovered assets for a woman in a similar situation. She was known for her tenacity and, more importantly, for her quiet, methodical approach. I found her number, tucked away in an old address book, disguised under a fictitious name. Emma Vandelay Seamstress, a little trick Arthur and I had for sensitive contacts. I dialed her number, my hand steady, my voice calm, belying the storm brewing within. "Hello, Miss Vance," I said. "My name is Anna Rogers, and I believe my family is trying to steal my home." Her voice on the other end was clear, professional, and devoid of judgment. She listened patiently as I explained, offering no interjections, only quiet affirmations. By the end of our conversation, an appointment was set for the following week. My first small victory. My meeting with Eleanor Vance was a turning point. Her office was surprisingly modest, filled with stacks of legal tomes and the scent of old paper and quiet determination. She was precisely as I had imagined. Sharp, with kind but unyielding eyes that seemed to see right through pretense. I laid out my story, every painful detail, from the gradual disappearance of funds to Sarah's aggressive push for the new power of attorney. I showed her my meticulously kept notes, the original power of attorney with Arthur's crucial clause, and the suspicious bank statements. Eleanor listened, nodding occasionally, her gaze fixed on the documents. When I finished, she leaned back, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Mrs. Rogers," she said, her voice calm and steady. "You've done remarkably well. Most people in your situation at any age wouldn't have been so diligent. You've provided us with a very strong foundation." She explained the legal landscape. The existing power of attorney David held was indeed valid for general matters, but the specific clause about major transactions was my lifeline. The document Sarah wanted me to sign was designed to bypass that very safeguard, giving them a blank check. Eleanor advised me not to sign it under any circumstances. "But," she added, "we can use their eagerness to our advantage. Let them think they're winning. It will only make the eventual outcome more impactful." She then outlined a strategy. First, we would send a formal letter to my bank, alerting them to suspected elder financial abuse and requesting a full audit of my accounts, along with a temporary freeze on any withdrawals exceeding a small, predetermined amount. This would be done discreetly, without alerting David, Sarah, or Michael. Second, we would prepare a legal challenge to any attempts they made to sell or transfer my property based on the existing limited power of attorney. "The key," Eleanor stressed, "is documentation. Everything must be recorded, every demand, every threat, every perceived misstep on their part." That evening, I returned home feeling a strange mix of dread and exhilaration. The dread was for the confrontation to come, for the ugly truth that would inevitably tear my family apart. The exhilaration was for the fight itself, for the reclamation of my dignity, for Arthur's memory. He wouldn't have wanted me to just roll over. He'd taught me to stand firm, even when the ground beneath me felt like shifting sand. The very next day, Sarah arrived, her smile still unnervingly bright, the power of attorney document still clutched in her hand. "Mom?" she chirped. "Just checking in. Are you feeling up to signing today? We really need to get this finalized." I looked at her, then at Michael, who was now busy scrolling on his phone, barely bothering to feign interest. "Oh dear," I sighed, feigning a sudden lapse in memory. "I seem to have misplaced my reading glasses, and this print is so small. Perhaps tomorrow? Or maybe you could just leave it with me? I'll look it over later." Sarah's smile faltered, a flicker of irritation in her eyes, quickly masked. "Of course, Mom," she said, her voice a shade less sweet. "Take your time, but we really are on a tight schedule." She left the document, confident I would eventually sign. She had no idea the trap was already closing. The days that followed were a tense dance of politeness and barely concealed impatience. Sarah and Michael kept up their charade, visiting daily, always with the unsigned power of attorney within reach. "Just checking in, Grandma," Michael would say, trying to sound casual as his eyes darted to the document. "Any questions about the paperwork?" I'd feign confusion, a convenient cough, or a sudden need for a glass of water. "Oh, that old thing? Haven't quite gotten to it yet, dear. So much to keep track of these days." Meanwhile, Eleanor was busy. She'd quietly filed the request with my bank. Within days, I received a confirmation notice disguised as a routine account update, informing me of enhanced security measures and the new, lower daily withdrawal limit. It was a small, almost invisible change, but to me, it felt like a fortress rising around my life savings. David and Sarah, still unaware, continued to make their usual, larger transactions for what they considered family expenses, only to find them mysteriously blocked. The first frantic call came from David. "Mom, what's going on with the bank? My card was declined at the hardware store. They said there's some kind of limit on your account. I played dumb. Oh dear, a limit? Why, I haven't changed a thing. Perhaps it's just the bank being extra careful these days, with all the online fraud. He grumbled, clearly annoyed, but accepted my explanation. He still believed I was too naive to understand anything beyond the weather. The next call was from Sarah, her voice sharp with thinly veiled anger. Mom, Michael tried to transfer money for his tuition and it was blocked. They said we need your express written consent for anything over $500. What did you do? My heart gave a little flutter of triumph. The net was tightening. Well, dear, I said, putting on my best confused old lady voice. I really don't know. The bank just sent me a little notice about some new security protocols. Maybe you should call them. They're always so helpful. The following days were a flurry of escalating panic from their end. Their attempts to access larger sums were consistently denied. The pre-planned lavish vacation they'd booked, supposedly a treat for the whole family, but conspicuously not including me, was suddenly in jeopardy as their travel agent demanded full payment. The new car Michael had ordered, the down payment for which was supposed to come from my account, was put on hold. Their frustration simmered, then boiled over. One evening, David, Sarah, and Michael burst into my living room, no longer bothering with pleasantries. Mom, this is ridiculous! David exploded, his face red. The bank says you initiated some kind of security alert. They've practically frozen your account. We can't do anything. Yes, Grandma, Sarah added, her voice dripping with venom. Are you losing your mind? What are you trying to do to us? Michael, usually the quiet manipulator, actually raised his voice. We have plans, Grandma. You're ruining everything. Just sign that paper so we can fix this. He gestured wildly at the still unsigned power of attorney. I looked at them, their faces contorted with rage and self-pity, and for the first time, I felt no fear, only a profound sense of sadness mixed with steely resolve. They hadn't seen me as a mother, a grandmother, a person. They saw me as a bank account, an obstacle, a source of endless supply. Oh, I said softly, my voice clear and steady, cutting through their anger. You want me to sign that paper, do you? I picked up the untouched document. The one that gives you everything? Their eyes gleamed with renewed hope. Yes, Mom, David urged, stepping forward. Just sign it and everything will be fine. I smiled, a genuine smile this time, one that reached my eyes and chilled them to the bone. I already did, I said, but not the one you think. Their faces, moments ago alight with avarice, crumpled into confusion. What do you mean, Mom? Sarah stammered, her carefully constructed composure finally cracking. What did you sign? Michael's smirk vanished, replaced by a bewildered frown. David looked from me to the document in my hand, then back to me, a dawning suspicion slowly creeping into his eyes. This one, I said, my voice as calm and steady as the Alaskan winter night. I slowly, deliberately, pulled out a different piece of paper from inside the large, crisp document Sarah had given me. It had been tucked there for weeks, waiting for this moment, its presence a silent promise to myself. This paper was thinner, less imposing than the legal tome they had presented, but its contents carried the weight of 1,000 battles won. It was a formal revocation of David's existing power of attorney, meticulously prepared and notarized by Eleanor Vance, dated 2 weeks prior. And beneath it, a declaration of elder financial abuse, specifically detailing their attempts to gain control of my assets and their current financial blockages. I watched their faces turn from confusion to a sickly white. David snatched the document from my hand, his eyes scanning the words, his jaw slackening with each line. Sarah gasped, a small, choked sound, and Michael took an involuntary step back, as if I had suddenly transformed into a monster. The carefully crafted facade of concern, the thinly veiled demands, the condescending smiles, all shattered in an instant. The air in the room, once thick with their greed, now crackled with fear and dawning horror. "What is this, Mom?" David's voice was barely a whisper, stripped of all its previous bluster. "What have you done?" "I've protected myself," I replied, simply. "Just as Arthur taught me to. You see, while you were busy trying to simplify my life, I was busy ensuring that my future, and the legacy Arthur left, would remain safe." Sarah, recovering slightly, tried to rally. "This is ridiculous. You can't just revoke a power of attorney. This is some old woman's delusion." But even as she spoke, her eyes darted nervously to David's horrified face. She knew. They both knew. Eleanor Vance had been thorough. "It's quite valid, dear," I said, a hint of something cold in my voice now. "And it's been filed with the bank and with the local authorities. You see, when you started making those large withdrawals disguised as family expenses, the bank flagged them. And when your transfers started getting blocked, it wasn't just a security protocol. It was Eleanor Vance on my behalf, ensuring that my money, which you so casually considered ours, remained mine." I watched as the realization truly hit them. Not just the revocation, but the implication. The bank, the authorities, the potential legal ramifications, their grand plans, their lavish expenditures, their dreams of my wealth funding their mediocrity, all were collapsing around them. Michael, who had been so smug just moments before, now looked like a frightened child. His bravado had evaporated, leaving behind only the pallor of fear. "But the house," David finally managed, his voice hoarse. "You promised you'd help us with the house. We need to sell it to cover the loan we took out for Michael's business." This was the true core of their desperation, the hidden motive I had suspected. Michael's business, a risky crypto venture, had clearly imploded, and they had leveraged their own home, likely based on the assumption that my assets would be their fallback. "Your house is your responsibility, David," I said, my voice hardening. "Just as my house and my money are mine. You gambled, and you lost, and you tried to make me pay for your recklessness. But I don't pay twice for the same lesson." The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by Sarah's quiet sob. Their faces were no longer just white. They were etched with a raw, undeniable despair. They had come to collect, to exert their power, to dismiss me as a burden. Instead, they had found themselves disarmed, exposed, and utterly powerless. I had signed, indeed, but not the paper they wanted. I had signed my own Declaration of Independence, and in doing so, I had taken back everything. The aftermath was swift and brutal, as Eleanor Vance had predicted. The shock on their faces that evening was just the prelude. Within days, the bank, having received Eleanor's formal notification and my signed revocation, launched a full internal investigation. David and Sarah found their personal accounts frozen, a direct consequence of the fraud investigation now officially underway. Michael's business venture, which I later learned was a highly speculative crypto scheme, imploded completely, leaving them not only without my money, but also deep in debt. I received a formal letter from the bank, confirming their findings of suspicious activity and attempted unauthorized asset transfer. It wasn't just my money they were after. They had actually attempted to leverage my property as collateral for Michael's ill-fated venture, forging documents and signatures to do so. The sheer audacity of it left me cold. My home, the sanctuary Arthur and I had built, was merely another chip in their reckless game. Eleanor Vance, true to her word, ensured that the legal system moved with deliberate speed. A restraining order was issued, preventing David and Sarah from coming within a certain distance of my home or contacting me directly. All communication had to go through Eleanor, a relief I hadn't realized I so desperately needed. The silence in my home, once heavy with the weight of loneliness, was now a welcome calm, a space to heal. The whispers in the community, however, were unavoidable. Small towns in Alaska have long memories. News, especially of this kind, travels faster than a snowmobile on a frozen lake. Neighbors, who had always known me as the quiet, unassuming Mrs. Rogers, began to look at me with a new respect, a mixture of awe and sympathy. Some brought casseroles, others offered to help with chores, a quiet acknowledgement of the storm I had weathered. I accepted their kindness, grateful for the unexpected warmth. My grandchildren, confused and perhaps truly saddened by the sudden upheaval, eventually sent me letters, filtered through Eleanor. Michael, stripped of his easy confidence, wrote a clumsy apology, filled with vague promises of making things right. I knew it was more out of fear of consequence than genuine remorse. Sarah's letter was colder, still blaming me for destroying the family. David remained silent, a silence that spoke volumes. I never responded. Not directly. My message had been delivered loud and clear in that living room. The legal proceedings dragged on for months, a draining but necessary process. David and Sarah faced charges of elder financial abuse and attempted fraud. Michael, as their accomplice, also faced legal repercussions. They lost everything they had gambled with, and then some. Their home was foreclosed upon, their credit ruined, their reputations in tatters. The empire they dreamed of building on my supposed senility crumbled to dust. I often sat by the window in my living room, watching the snow fall, thinking of Arthur. He always said, "The truth, Anna, is like the winter here. It can be harsh, but it always purifies." He was right. The truth had cut deep, exposing the rot within my own family, but it had also cleared the air, leaving behind a stark, beautiful clarity. I had lost a son and a daughter-in-law, in a way that felt like a death, but I had reclaimed my home, my independence, and most importantly, my dignity. My life savings, once threatened, were now secure, a testament to decades of hard work and careful planning, not a jackpot for greedy hands. The betrayal had left scars, but the victory had made me whole again.